Packers fans, welcome into the Green 19 podcast from JS Online and PackersNews.com. I'm Kassidy Hill, joined as always by Tom Silverstein and Ryan Wood here from Lambeau Field, where we are coming to you a day earlier than we would normally do this Green 19 podcast during the season, but a significant day following the trade deadline in the NFL. Packers only made one move, which, you know, compared to some teams is not a huge thing, and on paper they take a guy that they got off a practice squad 2 years ago and turn him into a trade for a third-round pick. But still sort of sends a message after the Packers trade away corner Rasul Douglas to the Buffalo Bills, get a third pick, and they traded Douglas and a fifth-rounder. Is that right?
That's right.
And get a third-rounder for next year in return. Locker room today seemed to say that it shocked them a little bit. Spoon, what do you kind of take as the takeaway from what the Packers' messaging, for better or for worse, was with this trade?
I don't know what the messaging was, but I think they got an offer for a guy who was going to have a $2 million roster bonus in March and a $6 million base salary next year, and then becomes a free agent the following year. And someone was offering a third-round pick, and they said, you know, he's 28, 29 years old. Yeah, I mean, there's no question that, you know, by not doing anything at the trading deadline, that they are a rebuilding team. You know, they're in it. I still think going into the year they had the possibility to at least have a winning record and set the stage for later years, but still be competitive, because that's what Packers standard is around here, and you don't want to mess with that standard. But at this point, they're not going anywhere. 2-5. The best they can hope is to get on some run at the end of the year, and, you know, look forward to the year after that. So if someone offers you something for a guy who's going to turn 29 and has a big contract next year, I'd take a third rounder. Yeah.
Ryan, as Spoon said, this kind of says that they're fully in a rebuild. If you're in the locker room and you're a Packers player, what do you kind of take from hearing about this trade?
Yeah, I talked to a lot of veterans in the locker room today, and they're just kind of doing the best they can. I mean, Kenny Clark's a guy that's played in 3 NFC championships, and they're a long way from that, and they're not getting any younger. So it's not an easy reality to cope with. Brian Gutekunst did not say the word rebuild, but he said the word process a lot. And for me, over these last few days, I've been going back to the offseason, and there was multiple times that Brian Gutekunst made a point to say that, hey, Packers didn't have a winning record till midway through Aaron Rodgers' second season with him. I don't think that they're surprised. I don't think he's surprised with where they're at. Brian Gutekunst did say that he expected more, but as I told Brian Gutekunst in a question, when you draft someone, you're not expecting the first 7 games of their career to be their best 7 games of football. It takes time to develop. Now, you can certainly question how quickly the young guys have developed, but I think they came into this knowing that it was going to take some time. And what they did in that one move you mentioned is that they definitively set that timeline as it's not going to be a quick fix, which I think we all knew, seeing how the season was going. We all knew that they're a long way from where Kenny Clark was playing in 3 NFC championship games. So they're a long way from that. So it's going to take time. It's going to be patient, and they're going to need the results to come eventually. They're not going to come overnight, but they need to come eventually, or that's when significant changes at the top are made.
I want to get into a little bit more like the whole rebuilding aspect of this and kind of, you know, what they're accepting as their fate for this year. But let's spend another minute on the Rasul Douglas of it all. Keyshawn Nixon said today that he was even distracted in practice, just trying to keep his thoughts kind of going in the right way, and said, you know, Rasul was sort of the voice of the message we wanted to have and what we were preaching in the locker room. Matt LaFleur shut down any ideas that this trade was sort of precipitated by the fact that Douglas has been open with some of his frustrations the past couple of weeks and said, we want our guys to speak their minds. But for some of the guys in the locker room, we even saw on Sunday, Ryan, after the game, so many guys kind of go by his locker almost like he was the godfather, needed a minute with him afterwards. So for this year, right now, this 2023 season, when you do have a young locker room and you are in a rebuild, Spoon, do you not need some of those voices, or do you kind of expect somebody else to step up and sort of fill that role of being a guy in the locker room that everybody looks to? Do you need your guys like Aaron Jones, Jordan Love to be those guys and sort of expect them to take on that role?
Yeah, I mean, you still have Preston Smith and Kenny Clark, and you'd like Quay Walker to be kind of the voice, the defense. If Devondre Campbell was healthy, he'd be part of that as well. I've been around a long time, and I've seen players who tick off management and then they get dealt. We saw it with Josh Sitton. They just didn't like what he was doing in the locker room.
What was he doing?
He's just kind of a negative Nelly, and he was just, he controlled the offensive line room. He could spread stuff really quickly. That wasn't, good. I think he was kind of a thorn in McCarthy's butt. And so you see stuff like that, and if a guy's ripping management or he's really being behind the scenes locker room lawyer, but I don't think Douglas was doing that. Right. And I don't think that him expressing frustration about how the team is playing is a negative, and I don't think the team perceives it as a negative either. I think they're like, well, at least one guy's taking accountability for how crappy they are.
That's what it more so was. It seemed like it was accountability and frustration of saying, I know we can be better. We have to be better.
Yeah, and so I don't think that was the reason, but I do think the message was, losing Rasul Douglas isn't going to cause this team to lose every single game the rest of the way.
And keeping him is not going to cause them to win.
Is correct. They're not going to win the Super Bowl because Rasul Douglas was here. I think it was an opportunity. I think probably in Gutekunst's mind, he's like, oh boy, I got a first, 2 2s, 2 3s, and probably 2 4s, when compensatory picks come out. I could control the draft with that kind of a, basket of goodies. So that's probably my guess is how all that went down. Plus, they like Carrington Valentine. And they want Eric Stokes back.
Rasul Douglas had been very introspective as well as critical. So I think that, no, it was not the same as Josh Sitton. I spoke with Jaire Alexander today, and that in and of itself is interesting because he only, almost by rule, he only speaks to anyone in the media on a Friday, and it's on video. Week after week, after this last game, he said, I don't know, kind of like, I'm just here not to get fined. I mean, he can play some games with his weekly media press conference, but there was no games today. I asked him what losing Rasul Douglas via trade means for him, and he said very flatly that it didn't change that much, but he knows that there is going to be more eyes on him and what he does and what he says. Because Rasul Douglas had very much been that conduit with the young guys. He's played a ton of football. Aaron Rodgers last year, I think, said that Rasul Douglas is as smart of a football player as he's been around. I think he compared him to Charles Woodson. That's who Rasul Douglas is and what he had been to this locker room in this secondary. So Jaire Alexander is very well aware that, there's more on his plate now. It's not just go and shut down half the field. It's not even just go and get that back cured. It's Jaire Alexander and a ton of young guys in that room that he is going to be expected by management, by the coaching staff, to shepherd in their development, and he's not able to share this leadership role anymore with Rasul Douglas. It's all the eyes are on him.
I don't think he minds that one bit. I really don't. I think
Yeah.
he's the guy who wants all the attention on himself. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if he were a little bit jealous of Rasul Douglas. We know they didn't always see eye to eye, on some stuff. I
They had
bet.
gotten to a point where they had a positive working relationship.
I think
but
so.
They were definitely different people.
Yeah, yes, very different styles. But Jaire Alexander is all about the spotlight. He wants to be the best corner in the world, and he hasn't played up to it. Let's face it, he has not. I wonder if this is going to affect, if this putting it all on him is actually something he wants and will respond to. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there because I know how he reacts or how he plays.
The only thing I will say is that I asked him if he'd had a chance to speak with Rasul Douglas since the trade, and he said that yes, he was asking him all kinds of questions about what happened, how are you feeling about it, checking in on him. And I asked him, what's his defense as a whole? What was his secondary missing without him? And he said a veteran on the other side of the field, a guy that has the know-how, knows what to do, where to be. And he said, not to mention, the ball always falls in his hands. In 2 words, a veteran playmaker is what they lost. And it's not just the locker room. It is the locker room, but it's also the field. So Jaire Alexander was very complimentary of his time with Rasul Douglas, the player that he is, and the void that is now left without him.
You have something to say?
Well, I just also wanted to point out that his production hasn't been what it was. This hasn't been a great year for him. Last year he did have the 5 picks, but he got beat for a lot of touchdowns.
Yeah.
And he got beat for a lot of touchdowns this year, too. And he is that kind of guy you want on your team. He's going to back you up all the way. He's tough as nails. He did a great job on Devontae Adams with help. But he's not Jaire Alexander. He's not he's not a Pro Bowl corner. He's a good, solid veteran that you like having over on that side.
He has been elected as an alternate to a Pro Bowl, which Wikipedia classifies as a Pro Bowler.
I think it'd be fair to say.
Wikipedia, yeah.
I think it'd be fair to say now, Jaire Alexander has not been healthy, and that's very significant. And a back injury's not a good one to have.
No.
But
and
I
if
think
he can't play, they're screwed.
Yeah, I think it'd be fair to say, though, that he has been better in the first 7 games than Jaire Alexander. I think he's playing at a higher level.
At least physicality-wise.
I
there were a couple games he was the
don't
leading
know.
tackler.
That's how my eyes have
But
seen it.
he's got he's given up 3.5 touchdowns. He
I can
had
think of 3: Lions, Broncos, Vikings.
And there was another. I'd have to go back and look at my stats.
Yeah.
But, he's given up some. I think he'd given up 4 20-yard completions. He's a guy. You want opposite Jaire Alexander.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good match. That's a good match with them. But it's not. Again, it's not going to take you to the Super Bowl.
Right. No. Some of that I think is, and this is all pointless now because he's not here. Some of that I think was risk reward. We're going to put you in a position where you might come away with a turnover, keep stuff in front of you. You might also get beat, and if you don't have that help behind you, you're going to give up a touchdown.
Yeah, I think he'll. Prospects of him being better in Buffalo are pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
They have more players around him.
Mm-hmm.
The safety play will be better around him. They may, with Tre'Davious White out for the year, he's kind of the number 1 or number 2 corner, and that's I don't know how that's going to work out.
And I just was going to say kind of something along those lines to put a bow on the Douglas part of it. Is it doesn't sound like this was something the Packers were shopping. It sounds like the Bills came to them requesting this.
I think they were going after Jalen Johnson from the Bears and thought they had him, and then they didn't. And then they panicked and came to the Packers. And from my understanding is that they offered a fifth, and they wouldn't come off it. Mm-hmm. And, Gutekunst said a third or nothing. Mm-hmm. There's got to be a third involved. And
if you're Gutekunst, would you have almost rather have had a fourth? Given your draft history with the third.
Well, you can trade a third to get into the second.
That's true.
You could trade a third to get up into, if you're picking sixth, and you can use some of those picks to get into number 2, know. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how all of them react to this. But Valentine, for one, is, okay, if you're going to be a cornerback of the future, now's your time to show it.
Thrown into the fire, bud.
Yep. You're... and then when Stokes comes back, now his position is defined. Mm-hmm. He's going to be on the opposite side. I think he's got 2 more weeks.
2 more weeks, I think.
Because he was
4 games.
It's 4 games.
And he went out in the Broncos game.
So
he has
right.
3 more games.
Yeah. 2 after this. Yep.
Yeah. Same with Savage. So, Carrington Valentine spoke with the media today. He's had some vet moves of being able to avoid that for a while, but I think he finally knew today, like, okay, it's caught up to me. I've got to talk. But here's my question, and Ryan, I'll start with you. For as much as we're looking at Carrington Valentine, and this kind of goes into are they building for later, or are they still trying to win right now? Do you expect to see Carrington Valentine? If Jaire Alexander is on the field, do you expect to see Valentine or Ballantyne?
Valentine. And Brian Gutekunst said it himself. One of the byproducts of this, they wanted the 3rd-round pick because, as Brian Gutekunst said, that's a 4-year rookie contract. And in the 3rd round, you're supposed to find starting players. I know Brian Gutekunst has not found starting players, but that is the NFL-level expectation. So we'll see.
Is holding it down for them 3rd round.
Yeah, he is holding it.
We'll see. And the clock's,
Tucker Kraft is in that boat now.
But we'll see if that happens. He also clearing the salary cap space. This is a team that is, they can. You sense that they can see the finish line of this cap hell that they've put themselves in the past couple of years, and they want to get there. But Brian Gutekunst also said this clears some snaps for developmental guys, and one of the major emphasis today that Brian Gutekunst had was, this is the process, and they are trying to evaluate everyone. Obviously, Jordan Love's at the top of that list, but they are evaluating everyone. And some guys are going to rise to that occasion. Some guys aren't. And then they have a lot of draft picks now next year to be able to fill the holes, that guys that don't respond. But they want to see they want to learn more about this roster. And it kind of feels a little bit like preseason. Like in preseason, we're all evaluating the team, like who's going to make the team, who's on the bubble, who's on the other side of the bubble.
It's not necessarily about the wins or the
losses.
losses.
Yeah, that's kind of how this is, right? Like, Carrington Valentine now has these snaps. How's he fit in the long-term picture? There's going to be a sample size now that the GM and the scouts have to evaluate how can he fit in long-term. He's going to get that opportunity. So that was part of this as well.
Do you agree we see more Valentine than Ballantyne?
Yes. Yeah, no question. Carrington Valentine's the guy they're invested in. I think he'll take his lumps. I think just like he did against Denver, he's going to take his lumps until, they'll hope that Stokes can come back and give them something this year. This thing is going to fly one way or the other. So while I think it was a mistake to just write this year off, because I think the damage it could do to Jordan Love could be significant. But let's say they get through it and they muddle through and they're, 5-12, or how many games do we play now?
4 and 6.
17.
That's right, 5-12. That's 17. And I'm bad at math, but I think that's right.
Okay, so let's say they're 5-12 or 6-11, and they're picking, 7th or 6th or something like that. Okay, so they've got all these picks, and they're going to be able to clear some cap space because they're going to be bringing in a lot of picks, that are low-cost guys. They need to make a splash in free agency, and they need to make this commitment to their team that, okay, 2024, we're all in. All the chips are in for 2024. And so I think he, and for his own good, has to really draft well, but he has to add some free agents too. I don't think you just sit there and go draft. Bring in, fill every gap that you got with draft picks and some free agents, and you'll have some cap room. We got Jordan Love one more year before his big contract comes in. Potentially, right. So do it. And then if you suck the next year, then you draft a quarterback.
But you got a good quarterback class coming up. So, I mean, let's play hypothetical for a second. Let's have fun. Let's say you've got a top 5, top 6 pick, and you've got not even a decent, I'd call it a good quarterback class coming up. What do you do?
So you have to make the decision. Are you going to take the quarterback, or are you going to build around Jordan Love? Are you going to take Marvin Harrison Jr., for instance,
or
the kid from LSU, or a left tackle,
or Brock Bowers,
and plus, you should be able to get, with all the picks he's got, you should be able to get a wide receiver, a tackle, a tight end, a cornerback, or you just, you shoot for everything, and you either go for Harrison. You got Harrison and Watson together. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's what they do. They got to figure that out. But I don't think that the answer to that question until we see Jordan Love play the rest of the year.
I would pay a subscription, a pay-per-view amount for a camera on Aaron Rodgers if they drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. with a top 5 pick next year.
More scotch.
A legitimate receiver threat that can make an immediate impact. A 3-finger scotch.
But the other thing is, if they're the number 3 pick in a draft, and they got a chance at one of those quarterbacks, you got to think hard about it. You really do. You have to see where Jordan Love is, but if they're certain he's a generational guy, I don't know. You got to think about it.
Jordan Love or the draft pick being generational?
The draft pick. Okay. You have to think about taking him.
Yeah,
you do.
Ryan, would you do it?
Well, that's the hard part they have right now. Is this decision very well may be looming, because when you look at the schedule and the trajectory they're on, they seem like they're on a path for a top 5 pick for the first time since 2006. And the difference now to then is in 2006, they had Brett Favre as a starting quarterback, and they just a year earlier drafted Aaron Rodgers. They didn't need another quarterback in the top 5. They are no more near as barricaded at that position now. But the issue is that and I asked Brian Gutekunst this today, how do you evaluate Jordan Love individually when there are a ton of drop passes, there are wrong routes, there are missed blocks, there are free rushers coming at him, and there's a ton of penalties. Yeah. And a lot of these things have very little to do with Jordan Love and how he's playing, but it's screwing up the entire offense. That's not to say Jordan Love's playing at an MVP level either. He's not. But so little of this has to do with Jordan Love, and it's happening, and it's an issue for the entire unit. That's a problem for Brian Gutekunst. That makes the evaluation so much harder, exponentially harder. I don't know how that's going to fall. I'm with you, Spoon. I think that we got to see how this final 10 games shake out, but I think that's a real problem.
It's a question. I don't know that Ted Thompson faced it because I think he was sold on Aaron Rodgers, but after 2008. Rodgers is okay, but they had, what was B.J. Raji, 5th pick, 6th pick, something like that?
He was 2009.
Right, the following year after Rodgers. So what was he? So maybe he was a little higher than that. I mean, a little lower than that. I can't remember.
I think he was like 12 or something like that. I'll check.
Look it up while I'm talking.
Teamwork.
But what he did, what Gutekunst has to do is what Thompson did, was hit on that 09 draft. He hit B.J. Raji and Clay Matthews, and that turned his entire team around. Mm-hmm. Those two guys really turned that defense around, and then, they were kind of starting to groove as an offense. What pick was he?
He was ninth overall.
Ninth.
I tweeted this yesterday. You look at 2008. They hit on Jermichael Finley that year in the third round. They hit on Josh Sitton in the fourth round that year. 2009, they didn't just have, and this was big, they didn't just have Raji and Clay Matthews, but they also got T.J. Lang in the fourth round. 2010, they got a franchise right tackle in Brian Balaga.
Mm-hmm.
They got James Starks in the sixth round, which is for a sixth round, get a solid number 2 running back that they don't go to the Super Bowl potentially with that year without. Ted Thompson was able to sprinkle through all rounds guys that became foundational to that roster each year. And that's how he built around Aaron Rodgers in a very significant way. 2008 was also Jordy Nelson in the second round.
Mm-hmm.
These weren't just first round picks. They hit in the first round with in 2009 with those two, but it was all rounds. And that's what Brian Gutekunst has to do now if he decides to build around Jordan Love, and he's got those 5 picks and likely the top 93 and likely the top 60 to do that if that's the route he goes. But that's how he has to do it. That's how he has to build if he wants to build around Jordan Love.
Let me ask y'all both this. Ryan, you mentioned earlier almost evaluating it like it's the preseason. And we're talking a lot about the draft, which I brought it up, I know. There are still 10 games left in this season. If you're in the locker room, can you treat it like the preseason at all in your mind? Or you can't do that, can you? You have to still go out there and try to – because – Brian Gutekunst pushed back very quickly on the narrative today that any team actively tries to tank. And that would almost be how a player would have to think about it if they're treating it like the preseason.
Unless you're the Dolphins, right?
There was no proof of tanking.
That's a good point.
So how do you marry, if you're in the locker room, and Ryan, I know you said the veterans, but I'm looking at like the young guys too. How do you marry like wanting to still like get better and prove that you're worth it on a rebuilding team, and also wanting to like go out there each week and win, so to speak?
These young guys are playing for their job, because if they end up with a top 5 pick, one of these young guys might be losing their job, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Christian Watson has a potential, he has a chance to be a number 1 overall receiver in this offense. But if they take Marvin Harrison Jr. instead, well, that's the number 1 receiver. Same with Jordan Love. He's got a potential to be the franchise quarterback long-term here. Well, if they take Drake May or Caleb Williams, there's a new starting quarterback in town. So these guys are literally playing for their job right now to avoid being that high in the draft, so that those type of options cross Brian Gutekunst's desk. And I think that's a hell of a motivator.
The veterans are too.
Yeah.
The Preston Smiths, the Campbells. If they put something together down the stretch, they're more likely to keep the group together than they are to just split it up. If they just stink every week, then they're breaking a lot of this
Selling
up.
it for parts.
Yeah, and then they'll sign free agents and they'll draft.
I'll say this though, you're more than forgiven for bringing up the draft, because that's where this team is, and it hasn't been this way in 2 decades, where it's November 1st. And the draft is foremost on the mind, because they clearly need more talent, and this is a team that's going to be potentially, it's on the trajectory to be in a place that it hasn't been in a very long time. This is going to be a very different offseason if this continues, because it's so often that they're picking in the 20s. And if they get a high pick, that's like in the low teens. Like, this is a very different reality that they're looking at. So, yeah, that's part of it. But Brian Gutekunst said this multiple times today, too. Right now the focus is on beating the Rams. And for good reason, because this is a potentially very big game. If Matthew Stafford doesn't play Sunday and they're going against Brett Rippon, this is a game that they could win. And you look at the schedule, next week's at Pittsburgh. That's a solid team. It's a really good defense. It's on the road. They've got Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert. They've got the New York Giants are not a good team, but that's primetime Monday night. That's not an easy. They got the Lions and Thanksgiving Day. They're going to absolutely run roughshod over this group. There's not a lot of winnable games left to avoid being in the top 5. this could be one if it's a backup quarterback that they have on their schedule. They absolutely have to take advantage of it.
Well, you made my transition for me. You got something you want to add?
I
something?
did, and now I forgot what it was. Oh, the Rams are tanking too. They're in a total rebuild as well.
Yeah.
So this is going to be like the rebuild game. You
Well-
know, the tank ball.
Look at the Raiders, who fired their head coach and GM but beat the Packers 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Not only
yeah.
fired their
That's
head
who
coach
they
and
are.
GM, they also benched their quarterback publicly.
Yeah.
And
quarterback today.
their offensive coordinator too. They fired
And their
him,
offensive
too.
coordinator.
And that's a team that
like
beat the Packers.
the inside linebackers coach is the interim head coach or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. I almost wonder, do they call Rich Bisaccia?
Oh, yeah, but it won't happen this year. He can't.
Yeah.
He can't leave until the season's over.
Okay.
But they got to make a splash. They have to make a big splash.
Yeah.
They gotta.
Josh McDaniels has 4 years left on that contract.
God.
Oh my!
What a
You want to see
mess.
dysfunction, Packers fans? Let me tell you, this is a bad season. It's a bad season. They are struggling right now, but this is not dysfunction. There's real dysfunction in this league, and it resides on the Las Vegas Strip.
Well, that's fitting for Vegas.
It sure is.
The best paying coach or best paying job in America is an out of job coach.
Mm-hmm.
That is-
Yeah.
that is-
Gosh. I think
Usually
we would
the
all
best
agree that
thing.
we envy Josh McDaniels today. I know that's never fun to get fired, but my goodness, 4 years left on that contract.
Yeah.
One last
Unreal.
note on tanking before we do look a little bit more at this game on Sunday. Before I came here, I was covering the Jags, and they were hoping for back-to-back years with number one picks, which is what they got. And that 2021 season before I came here, it was so weird to be at games, and when the opponent would score, Jags fans would cheer. Like they were happy for the opponent to score because they wanted to tank.
Well,
And
Packers
so-
fans are still cheering first downs, so I think that Packers fans
They were-
Yeah.
still reside some semblance of hope inside, but we'll see how quickly that
Well,
changes.
and then if you're the Jaguars, you are not only fighting to get better, but you're fighting culture.
Mm-hmm.
You're fighting decades of a losing culture.
Right.
And the Packers aren't fighting that. The Packers have a winning culture, and they're fighting not to have a losing culture. And they can't, they had a losing record in 17 and 18 and last year. And then if they're going to have another one this year, that's starting to be a little bit of a trend. And, considering they have 5 losing seasons in the past 30 is,
No
that
one else in the NFL feels for it. Sorry for.
Think about what Rasul Douglas, what his parting words now were. Rasul Douglas said after the game against the Vikings this past Sunday, I ain't never been a loser. And I look at last year and this year, I'm a loser.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, I know that's not me. I don't think that's us. That's a direct quote.
He's not anymore.
Well, he's not. He's in Buffalo now, but that's exactly what you're talking about, which is that cultural battle of, okay, right now you look in this locker room, you look around, guys that never lost before, they're losers right now. They're not used to it. You can't get used to it.
Well, they have a chance on Sunday to get a win. Well, of course, as you said, keep an eye out for Matthew Stafford on the injury report as the week goes on. But you still are going to have to deal with Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, and possibly Aaron Donald, who they've not really had to deal with the past 2 times they have faced this team. And so I guess my question is, are there enough pieces, no matter who's at quarterback, on this Rams team to still make this a difficult game for the Packers to win?
I think so. I think anybody can beat the Packers. I don't think there's a team that can't. Chicago couldn't, so maybe they still can't.
Maybe the Panthers.
But yeah, maybe the Panthers. I don't know.
They have won a game more recently than
That's
the
true.
Packers.
Yeah, the Saints could certainly beat them now.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't put anything past it. The Rams are basically the Packers if they're starting Brett Rippon. They're basically the exact same team, and I don't know. I don't know how it'll go. It's going to be one dog of a game. That's all I can say.
I think the fascinating part about this game, when you look at the Rams, if Matthew Stafford does not play, is that Brett Rippon is surrounded by elite playmakers. and that is something that Jordan Love is not.
No, that's
at this
true.
point.
That's true.
And so I think that from an evaluation standpoint, I'll be fascinated to see how much does a unproven, not franchise starting quarterback, how much does he benefit from being able to throw to a Cooper Kupp whenever he wants? How much of it is the quarterback? How much is the guy catching the ball? We're going to see that if Matthew Stafford does not play. We're going to see that with the Rams.
One of Jordan Love's few elite playmakers right now would still be Aaron Jones. He was in a red jersey on Wednesday, a no-contact jersey. Asked Matt LaFleur about it today, and he more than anything, he said it was like precautionary because of what Jones has been going through. He didn't want to, make it worse because they were in pads on Wednesday and they're normally in pads on Thursday. Spoon, is that should there be concern there, or do you agree, or do you believe LaFleur when he says he's not concerned? It was just caution.
Yeah, what I read into that was the coaches were banging them around today. Like, this was, okay,
That's right.
We're
He did say that. You're right.
We're going to, you could take a guy to the ground by accident, Don't take him to the ground, guys.
Right.
But, like they're trying to do some kind of physical. It sounded too like they were doing more like live 2-minute kind of stuff or whatever drills where maybe it was 1-against-1s or something like that, where they usually do 1s against scout teams. So maybe they were doing more of that. They just didn't want to get him knocked around. So that's how I interpreted it.
Yeah, and he did say they were going to shake some things up at practice or meeting rooms this week, so
right.
Maybe that was part of it as well.
All of Aaron Jones's injuries have been lower body, so usually when you get a red jersey on him, it's some kind of upper body thing. That's not true. Never mind. Forget I said that.
Strike it from the record. So stricken.
Yeah, it was a stupid comment. Okay.
You never make those. I know this is so far in the week that we haven't probably even thought about this yet, but Ryan, do you have a prediction for this game?
I think it solely depends for me if Matthew Stafford or Brett Rippon plays. We're going to have to all make our picks Friday, and I don't know if we're going to have a resolution by then. So it's pin the tail on the donkey, right? Because if Brett Rippon plays, I do think the Packers can, and I'll even say I'll pick the Packers to beat Brett Rippon. I will not pick the Packers to beat Matthew Stafford. That is my prediction. Take with that what you will.
Yeah, I think Aaron Donald is a bigger factor in this game too, considering what we've seen from this Packers offensive line. So something to consider as well. Spoon, do you have a prediction?
Yeah, I've sort of vowed after the Raiders game that I wasn't going to pick the Packers the rest of the year. So I may stick with that. I don't know.
Just see.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pete and I were the folks this past week.
It's not a bad strategy. Spoon.
I know
I certainly, if I do pick them Sunday, it'll be the last time I pick them for at least 5 games.
Famous last words.
Probably 6 when they go to Minnesota's. No, Minnesota's at the end of the year.
Minnesota's New Year's Eve.
Yeah, Tampa they play at some point.
After the Chiefs.
Yeah, so I'd probably take them to lose in that game. Yeah, this would probably be the last one of the season. Yeah. Maybe the Bears, I would take them.
Yeah. I know we've got coaches coming up here just the next minute or two, so I will give you both your final 60 seconds.
The one thing I will say about not obtaining a wide receiver, and I still think they should have done something, is that hardly anybody else did, which raised some red flags about the guys that were available.
And Goody said there were not really options there.
Yeah, from what I've heard, there was a lot of skepticism about DeAndre Hopkins, that he's always, complaining about his contract and he can be a handful. So that was kind of out the window. Jerry Jeudy, they were probably asking for a first for him. Cortland Sutton probably wasn't going to turn their team around. He wasn't. I still think he's the kind of guy, but he has a big salary. Hunter Renfrow, I still think would have been okay, but his salary is
and
huge.
He had a horrible game on Thursday night, too.
Did he?
Or Monday night, or whenever that
Monday
game
night.
was. Monday night.
Oh, did he?
He didn't have a great game.
So, unless there were some really cheap options, a running back would have been probably a better, if they could have got Derrick Henry on the cheap or, they weren't going to trade Saquon Barkley ever. That would have been okay. But I just think it says something that I guess it changed my opinion a little bit, the fact that nobody else was dealing for wide receivers. I was kind of surprised about that.
Ryan, your final 60 seconds. How much of your kids' Halloween candy did you steal?
A couple Reese's Pieces. Yeah, no, that's a clutch Halloween. I'll say this: I am an Almond Joy, peanut M&M, and then like Milk Dud and Dots. I like the Dots. That's...
Other than peanut
like
M&M,
Dots.
you just named some of the worst candies.
No, give me all those. You can have the rest. I don't need a generic run-of-the-mill candy bar. I don't need a Snickers. I don't need a Three Musketeers or a Milky Way. I don't need chocolate and caramel. I'll go get better chocolate and caramel than a Milky Way. I like those kind of novelty
How do you
pieces.
feel about Kit Kats?
I love Kit Kats.
They're solid. I won't I won't gorge myself on Kit Kat. I'll have all the Milk Duds in the world. That never gets old. I love Milk Duds. Kit Kats are okay. They're okay, but I need them in small sample size.
I love a Kit Kat.
Yeah, I do too.
Love some M&Ms.
Peanut M&Ms?
Both.
Okay. Peanut M&Ms are like
Snickers
the
have
holy grail
grown
for
on me as I've gotten older.
What is?
Snickers have grown on me as I've gotten older. And I'm not a big peanut butter person, but I'll eat a Reese's, but not a Reese's Pieces because that's too much peanut butter.
Yeah, it is. You know what the funny thing is? We were talking, and we're like, do we need to get candy? When's trick-or-treating? Because, half the time I'm not even home, And we're like, yeah, you better get some candy. And then, she went and got some candy, and then I got a text a little bit later. Trick-or-treating was yesterday.
Now you have all this candy at home.
I can understand why you were distracted
want-
yesterday. I can understand that.
Yeah, I don't want... Well, this was yesterday, the day before. But anyway, yeah. I'm like, throw that candy out. I'm like, just put it on the porch and let some kids come.
Because if it's not chocolate, I could go for some Nerds. So if you've got Nerds in there, the Nerds gummy clusters, that's an elite candy too. So if you've got any of those in there, tell her we'll take them.
No, they were all Kit Kats.
Last question. How do you feel about candy corn?
No.
I used to love candy corn. Now I think it's pretty gross.
Absolutely
it.
never.
It clicked what you just said. It's all Kit Kats?
It's all Kit Kats.
Then bring those down here, bud.
I will if they're still there. The dog hasn't gotten to them.
Oh, gosh, that could be horribly
Yeah,
bad.
that could be really bad.
As I said, we've got coaches here, so I'm going to let us go ahead and land this thing. But thank you so much, especially going a day early. We will see you all on Sundays. We'll have full coverage leading up to the game, too. We still got a couple of days here, and the Spoon will have his live blog. We'll have full coverage for you of Packers versus Rams. Guys, thanks as always. This has been the Green 19 podcast from JS Online and PackersNews.com.